27. Oh, yeah, wait, in just a minute. All right, this time I'd like to call the meeting to order, and I'd like to ask Representative Glanton if he would please lead us in a word of prayer.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Let us pray. Most heavenly and gracious Father, we just come before you on this day, just thanking you for the opportunity to come together, Father, to discuss the business of the people and what is in the best interest of children in this great state. Father, we ask your special blessings over the leadership of this committee and all the members of this committee, and likewise those who come here with an interest in education in the state of Georgia. We ask these and all things in the mighty and unmatched name of Jesus Christ. And those in agreement said,
Amen. All right, first of all, as we always do, are there any teachers out there or students that haven't been before? Please stand up. If you've never been here before, stand up and let us recognize you. Any students or college students or teachers out there, please stand and let us recognize you, because you're what it's all about. Okay. Anybody, this is your first visit to this committee, please stand. This is the first time you've been to our committee meeting. All right, you know how we operate. This committee operates this way, that all of our debating and all of our presentations, unless otherwise specified by the chairman, are handled in subcommittees. And these, at the full committee, we hear the legislation, and committee members are invited to ask all the questions they would like and to be sure they understand what's going on. Members of the committee, if you'll look at our agenda, I want to say that probably in the next 3 weeks, we're going to have probably the fullest agenda that I have ever seen in my 22 years in education. We've got so many things happening, and I'll be talking to you about those in a few minutes after our presentation. But one thing we want to do this year, because I think it's very critical, is because that's what we're all about, is have a spotlight on education. And that is to spotlight some innovative, creative students, teachers, or programs that are out there that really make this thing possible. So at this time, I'd like to call on Representative Randy Nix, who has our spotlight on education for today. So, Representative Nix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm really excited to introduce this program, part of the program, to you today. Ariane Weldon with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. I had met her and seen her in several different places, and she had asked if she could come by and see me back several weeks ago. And what I see in her program is this. We all want to, we can find one or two problems that we want to address. But the way Ariane has gone about her program is to avoid the problems. Let's fix the things before we get there. Now, she was trained, she may tell you this, as an epidemiologist. So her thought is, rather than wait until there's an epidemic, let's stop the disease before we get there. And she will hand out some information, and I think this is really, really telling as to what she does. On the back of it, it says, "Dear parent, dear family, dear teacher, dear student, dear policymaker, dear principal, dear concerned citizen, dear business leader, dear community leader, you're not alone." And I think that forms the basis of what she will tell us today. So, Ariane, if you will come and make your presentation, I will definitely appreciate it. And I think you will see some things here that are very interesting for us to be considering. And thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Representative Nix. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
And I'll ask you, if you would, pull the mic up to you and just eat that thing, and we'll keep the volume up there for you, okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I want to start off. I actually have a confession to make. So I'm here to present information to you that you can use in your decision making. I'm also here to recruit you to join the Get Georgia Reading campaign today. So Get Georgia Reading can really be Georgia's platform for profound change in education. Slide's not.
Is it going to hand out?
It's not going. The next slide. All right. The slide's not working.
Is it not working?
Yeah. Is there a, okay. Sorry. So in 2010, the Annie Casey Foundation Kids Count Report, we may need to hand them out. The Annie Casey Foundation released its first special report ever on a kids count indicator. After producing the Kids Count Report for 20 years, they released its first special report on third grade reading, showing that third grade reading could really be a make it or break it indicator for kids to succeed. The two main findings of this report are that third grade is when children make the shift from learning to read to reading to learn, and they need to finish making that shift. Children who don't meet that milestone are 4 to 6 times more likely to not graduate high school on time. So how are we doing right now? So in Georgia, 66% of our children are not reading proficiently. So in 2010, Governor Deal made third grade reading his #1 education priority, and Georgia launched a campaign. And in 2013, the campaign united public and private sectors by developing a common agenda. And in 2014, the Georgia campaign became known as Get Georgia Reading. Let me see if we have the... Get Georgia Reading is a platform for connecting agencies, sectors, disciplines, communities, and regions across Georgia around a common agenda with the shared expectation that all children will reach third grade reading proficiency. And I want to point out to you that we use the term expectation. It's not a goal. So if you think about that, Delta doesn't have a goal that their pilots will land their planes successfully, right? It's an expectation. And we should expect that our kids are going to be able to read and that they're going to graduate high school on time. We should be able to expect that as parents. So there are 5 main roles of the campaign. First, make sense of the factors affect.
I want to know that we're on page
Thank you.
5, and then you can keep us up. We're on page 5 in your handout. I don't know what's happened to our technology. I don't know what's happening, but where we can keep you up, okay? Our technology people are coming up to try to help you.
All right, so on page 5, thank you, 5 roles of the campaign. First, make sense of the factors affecting third grade reading across sectors and disciplines. Number 2, connect and convene decision makers to focus on families with children birth to 8. So in this case, it's a shared population focus. It's not a project focus. Number 3, use data to change the conversation and align resources towards shared pillars. 4, inspire collective action and innovation to create the conditions necessary for success. And 5, of course, we're a campaign, so we celebrate partner successes and clearly communicate the possibilities to realize the common agenda across the state. We're going to page 8 of your book. Representative Nix already took my second confession, which is I don't have a background in reading, but I do have a background in epidemiology. And what you see on page 8 of your booklet is really kind of a basic tenet of epidemiology. So you see where it says diseases. And now with diseases, there are always determinants. And that patterns of determinants are related to risk and protective factors that provide clues to population level solutions. If you replace diseases with low reading proficiency, that tenet holds true. There are always determinants, and patterns are related to risk and protective factors that provide clues for population level solutions. So let me show you, I'm going to go through a number of determinants and their patterns that provide some clues. So the first one is about learning to read and reading to learn. And what you see here is the relationship between third grade reading and 8th grade math. This is a study of 107,000 Georgia students, third grade reading scores, and their matched 8th grade math scores. In the next slide you see here on page 9 is the relationship between free and reduced price lunch on the left side, and then on the right is third grade reading proficiency. Each of those dots represents an elementary school, all elementary schools in Georgia. And the light blue is really good. That's lower rates on free and reduced price lunch. And light blue on the right also is high rates of reading proficiency. The next slide is another determinant, again showing you a pattern. And in this case, it's out-of-school suspension data by grade level. And that shows you by grade level for 2013, 2014. Now, what I like to point out on this slide is I asked the question, where does your eye take you on this chart? Right, so typically it takes you to where the peak is. And what you miss on that peak, if you go to the next page, what you miss there is that last year, over 14,000 kindergarten through third grade children received out-of-school suspension, and that's 5 to 8-year-olds in Georgia. Now, we like to use data in multiple ways, so we're going to take the same data and we're going to show it in a map. So what we did in this case was zoom in on one area of the state. We can zoom in on other areas. But on the left side is suspensions per 1,000, third grade reading, third grade, and the dark blue is good again in this case. So dark blue is low suspension, and then on the right is exceed third grade reading, again dark blue, high exceed rate. The next slide is the relationship between school climate and third grade reading proficiency. Oh, is it working? Okay. Okay. So what you see here is this is recently analyzed to show you that there is, again, there's a correlation between school climate scores and third grade reading proficiency. The next slide shows you attendance. Attendance is one of the factors in third grade in school climate. And it shows you again that the number of days in school would affect their third grade reading proficiency. The next slide is access to learning in the summertime. So learning in the summer months, or really learning outside of school time is the point. But in this case, you can see here, if you look at the lower part of the slide, it has during the summer months where you see those dips for those that don't have access to summer learning, and it continues to show a gap towards the later part. I'm sorry. The next one is, this was a groundbreaking study by Hart and Risley in 1995. And if you look on the left side of this chart, what it shows you is that there is a difference between 30 million words heard for children from ages birth to 3, from children in lower income families to children in higher income families. And why that's important is the result of that is that children who hear 30 million more words have over double the vocabulary at age 3. And children's ability to read proficiently by the end of third grade is attributable to the amount of vocabulary known by age 3. And again, showing you the same data in a different pattern. The next slide is a line graph. And what's important about this line graph, if you see here, the split on where the number of vocabulary words begins about 16 to 18 months. That's it. Oh, okay. And where that split occurs, it takes off very rapidly. So again, telling you that there's no difference before that point. The next slide is a video. I wonder if I could just pull the video up.
I will tell you, why don't you just go ahead and do the chart, because we're running, if you got it, okay, because we're running real short. We got it tight, so.
Are
okay.
extremely responsive.
I don't mean to make you nervous, but.
The emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby, who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
So indeed, Dr. Tronick mentions that they're working to coordinate, and really there's not really much of a difference if you see children from that age and children that are older not getting the normal interaction in their behavior, the reaction, the symptom of the behavior. The next slide, and again, you can tell I'm walking backwards in a child's age. So it really even starts earlier. Well, the next slide was that studies of infants at orphanages who are fed and clothed but not held, talked to, or played with will actually have failure to thrive and will actually die. That can really happen, and also happens in the U.S. The next slide is about gestational age. So in this case, this was again a Georgia study. I tried to show as much Georgia data as possible. And what you can see is that this is a study where we matched 5 years worth of babies' birth certificates to their first grade test scores. The question was, is there even a difference in terms of gestational age? And again, the pattern was incredibly significant. One of the surprising pieces in this finding was late preterm. Late preterm from 34 to 36 weeks. We have a lot of babies born there, and 35 weeks, they're not low birth weight, and there's nothing sort of outwardly wrong. And again, understanding who children are in a community, and you'll see there's some things you can do about it. So the next slide, all of a sudden, it indicates to you that we've gone about determinants of third grade reading that are beyond what may be typically known in terms of just looking at education, and really expanded it. So then the question is, well, where do we start? Now you've just said we've uncovered so many things that we've never considered before. And what Georgia did in putting together a common agenda with nearly 200 people from across the state, including agencies, organizations, local community groups, put together a common agenda focused on 4 pillars. And the idea is that these are the 4 pillars that create the conditions necessary for all children to succeed. And that's language, nutrition, access, productive learning climates, and teacher preparation and effectiveness. And that's implemented with 3 guiding principles: local ownership and innovation, of course, in Georgia, family engagement and involvement, and seamless continuity and alignment, with 7 drivers of change, using some smart thinking around using technology in a smart way, and of course aligning outcomes, approaches, policies, and investments. So I'm going to take you through each pillar just very quickly and give you one example. So the first one is language nutrition. And that quantity and quality of language, like healthy food, is critical to brain development. And language-rich adult-child interactions beginning at birth have a direct impact on social emotional development, cognitive development, and language and literacy ability. And it really is the metaphor it's meant to be. So Georgia's language nutrition prototype to bridge the word gap is Talk With Me Baby. And this is the partners with a shared purpose and population focus. And I want to point out each of these examples. There's a shared purpose and a population focus, and in this case, the population is 3rd trimester through the 1st year of life. going to have all those. So in this case, the nursing workforce, the next slide on page 19, the nursing workforce will be trained to educate and coach expecting and new parents about why and how to talk with their babies. And you may wonder, why nurses? For this population, 99% of all expecting and new parents from the third trimester through the first year of life see nurses, and they see them on a regular basis. And nurses are the #1 trusted profession in the United States. In addition, videos will be shown in every WIC office, where over 50% of all expecting and new parents visit. Those videos are looping now. And a public action campaign. We're working with Georgia Tech Research Institute and working on an app now that'll come available this summer that'll provide videos and a mobile app with reminders for parents. The next one. There we go. The next one is access, and I know this is can be vague, and really we give short shrift to the term access. So part of developing this agenda, the leaders that include the Department of Education, Department of Early Care and Learning, the Governor's Office, all different agencies and organizations, we took them to Georgia Tech and we met with supply chain engineers who are also trained in public health. And in this case, if you don't solve for these 6 A's of access, you can't claim that you have access. And so there's awareness, of course, but then think about affordability, accessibility, availability, accommodating, and acceptability. And you have the definitions there, and I'm just going to give you one example of where this happened. So because of the platform of the campaign, last summer we were able to bring together the Georgia Public Library Service with the Georgia Department of Education and the Georgia Department of Early Care and Learning. Those 2 agencies oversee the USDA Summer Food Program. And I actually received an idea from another campaign in another state. We're part of a national campaign that said, we're starting lunch at the library. And I thought, gosh, that's such a neat idea. I wonder if we're doing that. And we only serve 15% of those eligible in the summertime with a food program. So the map you see here are the 22 counties in Georgia that in 2013 didn't have any summer food programs at all. So this seemed to be a win-win situation. Well, it was really wonderful. We pulled together these partners, and the library systems really gravitated towards this, and whole regional library systems are talking now about implementing this summer. The next one is productive learning climate. So just as workplace climate impacts attendance, retention, and productivity, when children feel safe, have positive relationships with adults in school, they're more likely to attend, behave appropriately, and learn. And in this case, because of the campaign and having this platform, we're able to pull together the Georgia Department of Education, the Department of Early Care and Learning, and in this case, we're very excited about the RESAs. We were able to get a pretty large private grant that matched your investment last year for positive behavior interventions and supports. And we're doing an innovative prototype, not happening anywhere in the United States, that will implement an aligned approach of what's called the pyramid model of positive behavior interventions and supports with the school-wide model, focusing on children birth to 8, so that we really are meeting the needs of the developmental needs of these children and giving schools and teachers the skills that they need to make sure we retain teachers and that children can learn. And the last one is teacher preparation and effectiveness, where teachers provide high-quality, evidence-informed instruction tailored to the needs of each child. And in this case, we're doing, again, this is a demonstration approach in partnership with all of the education agencies, the Professional Standards Commission, the Georgia Department of Education, Early Care and Learning, in partnership with 2 school districts, applying a progression of learning approach from birth through 3rd grade to make sure we maintain the learning as children begin going into kindergarten. And we were able to get a private grant, again, to match the public resources, to bring in the national expert who developed this approach in partnership with hundreds of school districts around the nation, and the outcomes are pretty outstanding. Because the next slide on page 23 is that birth to 8 is when we need to teach kids to love to learn so that they can continue to learn throughout their lives. The next slide, I want to point here, this is the Get Georgia Reading Campaign Cabinet, and it's my honor to support this cabinet. If you notice here, this cabinet has a shared population focus, and they're all focused on the shared expectation. And we're really aligning resources, not having duplication, and I really want to acknowledge their work. So the last is that I'm providing you with 5 lessons learned based on the pillars and things that may be able to inform your decision making. So the first is to include language nutrition coaching as a competency among professionals already reaching most parents and babies, such as healthcare, nurses, early childhood education, to prepare all children for learning. I will tell you that we've already changed the curriculum at Emory School of Nursing. That's one of our partners. And they're already going to be embedding this, and we are developing a webinar for those nurses and talking with the technical college system about that as well, and developing a webinar for currently practicing nurses. The second one is to address access using the lessons learned from our supply chain engineer professional partners, and use the 6 A's that you saw in the earlier slide to address quality of life services so that all of Georgia's children are healthy and ready to learn. The third one is to create safe, supportive, and more productive learning environments by increasing the capacity of the state's 16 RESAs in their role of supporting positive behavior interventions and supports from pre-K through 12th grade. The fourth one is to include language nutrition and learning environment program standards in teacher prep programs in both early childhood and K-12 to strengthen teaching and learning at each grade level and increase teacher retention. And finally, improve the transition between the early years and the early grades through a shared understanding of developmentally based learning for children from birth to 8. And finally, I want to invite you to join the campaign to get Georgia Reading, and thank you very much for your time today.
Wait a second, let's take some questions now. I have, all right, 25. Who is that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hey, Ariane.
Thank you. Good.
If anyone follows me on Facebook and Twitter, you would see me hanging out with them at the biennial.
Amen, baby.
Somehow, Randy got the jump on it, though. Yeah. I want to ask you, because you would know if anybody, does the governor's office still give the book to every new baby in Georgia? Do we still have that program?
The book, they not.
She says yes.
She says yes.
Okay. But the nurses, so I assume the nurses are all aware of that, and
right, and we're trying to leverage that with more private.
Okay.
To be able to.
And they used to do the music too, I think. You know.
and great job with the presentation.
Good job. Randy, do you have a question?
Yeah,
All right.
I'd like to make a comment. Arian, that was a fantastic job working through the problem. She is persistent.
You are terrific, I'll tell you.
We've got to do something about making sure these things work.
Right.
Because I had insisted she had to have that video of the baby, because when she showed that to me, that's when I caught on to what she was trying to tell me. And I hope y'all did too. But through the confusion of it, you may not have gotten the gist of it. But as I said earlier, these are people who have looked at this thing in every possible way. From the time that child is born through the 3rd grade is just one thing, but this positive behavior system creates an environment for them to learn. We don't have control over that home environment. We're trying to get better opportunities through the nurseries, through all those people, to affect that part. And I think that's where they've done such a great job. And I don't want to preach on it, but I asked her to come, and I'm apologizing for all the distractions, but believe me, this is something that we need to look very closely at. There's so much that we can get from it in terms of what we're doing. And again, thank you, and I apologize on behalf of whomever that the technology was not working.
Well, you have some questions. One thing that I think is important, what you're doing, you're trying to meet with these parents from pregnancy till they get into school. That's where you're really trying to focus, and then working with the teachers. Is that not correct?
Right.
And all these different groups working with you to help these parents to understand, to love, to work, which is very good. Number 3, who is that? All right.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to say, without literacy, nothing else happens, and more of the standards are going towards even math and science and of reading and literacy. So I think this is very important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else have a question? Anybody else? Okay. Thank you so much. Are you going to be sticking around in it?
I am.
Well, we can see you later. We'll ask you some questions. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you so much. All right, this time we'll go into our formal agenda. We have 3 pieces of legislation. I guess all the authors of the legislation, all the authors are here of the bills. But one thing I'd like to remind, and help me out here, if you would, Sheena, there's something out before anybody starts leaving. I think it's important to be sure you understand some very specific dates that we're going to be having. The governor is calling all of the legislators in his office and talking to you about the recovery districts. Have most of you been involved in that? I hope already. Next week, is that not correct, Sheena? On the 11th, in 506 or 606? I believe it's 506 next week. All right, 506. That's the one we're going to have some specialists some people who've worked in Tennessee and from New Orleans. There's going to be a panel, and we're going to spend 2 hours for you to ask questions. It's your time to question these people, to get all your questions answered about the proposed Constitution Amendment. So you need the recovery district. So please, I know it's a lot of time, but we need to be here. You need to be fully informed, and you need to know about that. So and we're going to invite, I'd like to ask all the committee to sit up here with the Senate. We're going to invite all the House and all the Senate. And I think we're probably going to have to try to find an overflow room where we can televise this panel to others that want to come, because we're expecting big attendance. And so any questions about that? Now, that's next week at 1 o'clock in 506. Now, you're going to get a notice. Shannon's going to send this out to you, but we're going to let everybody know. I want to be sure you're here for that. Then the following week, I think it's critical that we're here, because I understand right now there are 3 resolutions surfacing that we're going to be dealing with on that, and that's APUSH. All of you understand? Advanced Placement, the APUSH, the history course, Advanced Placement History. We're going to have a panel discussion, 2 hours, and that's going to be also, Sheena, 1 o'clock, I think, isn't it? Yeah, 1 o'clock, and that's in 506. Is that right?
That one's in 606. I think, isn't that the 18th?
Yeah, the APUSH. All right, and that we'll send you a notice, but we want you to come. Now, what we're going to have a panel from the College Board. It's going to be a panel. They're going to have a history teacher that's teaching it. We're going to have people from the College Board here on one side. Then they're going to have the other side. Lindsay is working with some of the people who have been concerned about this, and he's bringing some of the presenters, and they will be on the other side, bringing in the people they want to address the situation or the problem or whatever, the question of the advanced placement history. Hopefully all your questions will be answered. Now this committee, can ask questions. Now there will be no audience participation. It's all for information. So plan to be here. That's going to be critical for you. That's going to be a very, very important one that we're going to have. So those are things that are coming, some very, very critical and important information. Any question about those 2 meetings? I hate to say this, but probably after the one next week, we're going to have a regular education meeting. It's important. You'll be here for 4 hours. I hate to say that, but we've got to get some stuff out. So that's going to be very critical, that legislation that's coming through, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. You'll hear what's coming out. In the next 2 weeks, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have probably the fullest agenda we have ever had. So we want you to be sure. Any questions now we'll send you the notice, plenty of notification about that. All right, if no further delay, I would like to call for the legislation at this time. All right, the first piece of legislation on our agenda that we have today is coming out of the Academic Achievement Subcommittee. So I would like to ask Representative Dudgeon, what is your recommendation and what legislation do you have?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Academic Achievement Subcommittee met on House Bill 91 and recommend a do pass.
All right. And since I am the author of that piece of legislation, I would like to ask our Representative Dudgeon if he would come over and take over and chair this meeting, and I will go down. I'd like to ask, is Mr. McGibbon, is he here? If he would come forward, and we'll go down and present. Thank you. You can sit anywhere you like.
Y'all going to sit together and play nice?
Just stay close.
All right, Mr. Chairman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I bring to you today a substitute. We'll be working with a substitute LC 335873S. That's LC 335873S. It's a substitute to House Bill 91. I want to say to you up front, this bill is probably dearer to my heart than any piece of legislation I have ever carried, and I've been here 22 years, so you know it's very special. I started working on this piece of legislation almost 15 years ago. Representative Maxwell, you remember, you served on that committee with me. Representative Dixon, you did too. When we were really concerned about where our Department of Education was going with graduation tests. Our poor students were asked to do things that I think were impossible for some of them to have to do, especially with the integrated math and all the things were happening, and they were asking to pass tests that on materials that they may not have had for 4 years. They had it early on and hadn't had it since then. But at that time, we asked the State Department to eliminate the graduation test and to go to an end-of-course test, which they did. But it took them about 6 or 7 years to get to the end-of-course test for all the content areas. So as of today, we have completely, is this not correct, have eliminated all the graduation tests. And what has happened, as you remember, back years ago, we had lots of young people who would appear before our committee requesting that we help them. They had gone to school, they had made A's and B's, and we were going to talk about a couple today that had 3.5 point averages. They did all the requirements for graduation, but they got up there, they had to take 6 end-of-course graduation tests, and they may have not passed 1 or 2 by 1 or 2 points. I'm going to talk to you today about a couple of students. Well, I could name lots of them, but a couple in particular that have taken the test anywhere from 22 to 33 times trying to get a diploma. I'm going to talk to you about students that would love to go to college, that could be accepted today, but they can't get in because they don't have a diploma, that want jobs that they can't get because they won't accept a GED, but they want a diploma. The military today requires diplomas. Even Walmart, ladies and gentlemen, they want their executives to have a diploma, not a GED. We're finding, so this is going to allow about, I would say, about 8,000 young people to go into the workforce, to start college, to go on with their life that we down here have held up for them over the last 10 or 12 years. So that's what I want to talk to you about. So if you'll take that bill, and I'm not going to go through the whole bill. I want to alert some of our new legislators that aren't familiar with how this happens. But this bill looks just huge. But I'm going to tell you, what we really care about is about 25 or 30 lines. This is, when you present a piece of legislation, you just can't correct 1 or 2 lines. You have to include the whole piece of legislation. So a lot of this is just the law that's presently existing. And if I run into a roadblock, I've got my wonderful legislative counselor back there that can help me out to guide us if we have any questions. But if you look on page 7, I'm going to tell you what this bill basically does. What this piece of and I have, I'm going to ask Gary here, if he will, in a few minutes to please give you some statistics about these graduation rates. But upon the governor's signature, that's what this bill is doing. It's not going to be July 1st, but we're hoping that we'll get it done quickly and the governor will sign it where these young people can get their diploma before this year is over. But this act right here is saying that any student that did not receive their diploma because they failed to pass any test or any requirement, now listen to this, that the state does no longer require for graduation. These are things that are no longer required. And Representative Carter, you as a teacher, you know what I'm talking about. They are being punished because we said that it's not a good test, it's not doing what we want it to do, but we're punishing those students because they did not pass something that's no longer required. We're saying that any of those students that fail to graduate because of that, that they can go to their local schools, their boards of education, and we're instructing the local boards of education to advertise that this action is being taken. They're going to, if you look on page 8, we're saying they got to advertise it on section C, line 256, 3 times in 16, 17, and 18 in the legal organ. We had some testimonies in subcommittee, Representative Dudgeon, you remember. One principal said, I'll tell you one thing, I'm going to go home and call 500 students myself. He said, I want them to know that. I want them to know they can graduate. But it's allowing that local board of education for them to go to that local board, apply for their diploma, because that's what they're doing now. The State Department right now is having to hear those. They're having to do all this grunt work and try to get all this information, and they're able to maybe give 300 or 400, I guess what, a year? A few hundred a year. But it would take them 25 or 30 years to take care of all these students. We don't need to do that. They can go to their local schools. The local boards of education will be authorized by us, the legislature, to grant that diploma, and they will be graduated. And they can then, many of these students, and you're going to hear from one today, I'm going to let him come up and speak. He actually walked with his class thinking he had passed that test, did not get his diploma because 1 point or 2 points on one test. That's not right. And so that's what this bill does. This bill, we're saying, will take, and it will simply be effective from the governor's signature. I'm going to ask the Senate, move it quickly. Let's get it. Let's have the governor come down. I hope he's listening. Go down to the Capitol. Let's have a ceremony.
I'll text him, Mr. Chairman.
And let's give him that thing. Sir,
I'm texting the governor.
Text him and tell him to listen. Yes, sir. Ask him, would he please be quick, please. But I want to ask Gary, if he would, just a few minutes to comment on this. He has some great statistics. Listen to this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want you to know the process that the student has to go through now. If they have met all the graduation requirements but did not pass a portion of the high school graduation test, they may apply for a waiver to the State Board of Education. That is a onerous process. They have to go to the local school. They have to ask the school to create a packet of information. All that information then is compiled and sent to the Department of Education. We have to verify every piece of information that's sent to us, because the only way they can get a waiver is through the Administrative Procedures Act, which is either a hardship or a disability. So they have to provide information that supports their claim that they have a hardship or disability, and that includes us having to verify every piece of information that comes to us so that we can then summarize that information and provide it to the State Board of Education, and the State Board of Education has to look at each one of those and determine in their own mind, almost in a judicial way, whether the student has met the requirement of a hardship or disability, which is very subjective. We receive 400 to 500 a month. The board is looking at over sometimes as many as 4,000 a year. Now, they don't approve all of them because, again, they have to hold the standard of the student meeting the hardship or disability. And again, that's totally subjective. And that's a very difficult position that the State Board is in every month. And then after they make their decision, we have to then inform the Secretary of State's office of the board's decision. We then have to form a letter to send to the local school system, who then they have to make sure that the applicant receives a copy of the letter. If the State Board denies a waiver, the student then can send another application to us under the category of a reconsideration. We cannot ask the board to reconsider a waiver unless they have provided us with new information. So then if they have provided us with new information, we have to go through the same process again, create information for the State Board. The State Board has to go through and review those again. So it's a very onerous process, but besides that, the most difficult part, ladies and gentlemen, is what we see. Monday of this week, ironically, I just talked to a 41-year-old who did not pass one part of the basic skills test in 1987. He's been passed over 4 times for a promotion in his company, not because of job performance. The company wants him to be promoted, but the company requires a high school diploma. He met all the graduation requirements. He passed 2 out of the 3 basic skills tests. He failed the 1 basic skills test by 3 points. Since 1987, he's had to live with that, and it's impacted his life. We get stories like that every day. We have that conversation, yes, I'm sorry your child has to pass the test, it's no longer required. It's a very difficult conversation to have. And I have to agree with Chairman. I've been in education 39 years, and I have never really seen a bill that will have such a positive impact on so many citizens in Georgia.
Let me say to you, I want to read you something. I got hundreds of these. Got a standing ovation Sunday at Yale from the principals, counselors, for this bill. But I want to read you something. Like I said, I can bring you a stack of these. Please just bear with me. Listen to this. Representative Coleman, I am emailing you today on behalf of my daughter, Stephanie Gordon, and the House Bill 91. Mr. Coleman, my daughter attended Whitfield County Schools, and she walked on graduation day at Northwest Whitfield High School, class of 2004. But she did not receive her diploma because she could not pass the science and social studies portion of the graduation test. However, she passed the other 4 with flying colors. I have watched her from the 11th grade until just a few years ago continue to try to pass this test so that she could receive her diploma that she earned and start her journey in life. She just turned 29 years old, and bless her heart has given up going back and trying to pass the test because at this point she is too embarrassed to go to school at the age of 29. She says she does not want to sit in there with 17-year-olds. Kaylin had very few absences in school, and listen to this, had a grade point average of 3.6 and was eligible for HOPE. As you know, without a diploma, you cannot be a productive citizen that you need to be. She has worked right on all these years, but only making minimum wages, and she has so much to offer and deserves to be able to better herself. I see the sadness in her eyes, and this had followed her all of her adult life. Is there anything, if there's anything that I as a parent can do to help with this bill, let me know. I'll be there. What a glorious, happy day it's going to finally be, brings tears to my eyes, to see her get her diploma and stop being passed over. That's what it's all about, people.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a great segue into, if the chair will indulge, we had actually a constituent of mine, Caleb Thomas, try to come to our subcommittee meeting, but was intercepted by the ART device on the 14th Street Bridge and was able to make it. So at this time, I would like to recognize in the audience Bob and Debbie Thomas and Caleb Thomas and their grandfather Hudson. If Caleb, you don't mind coming to the microphone just for a minute and just give us just real briefly your story. And he went to high school with my boys.
Hi, I'm Caleb Thomas. I'm 19 years old. I went to Lambert High School, which is in Forsyth County. I took the math graduation test a total of 5 times. The last time I studied for about 2.5 months, and I worked extremely hard with 2 tutors, and I only got up getting 185, and the graduation test requires 200. And so now I'm working full-time at Chick-fil-A, just getting some money, and since I can't really do anything, I don't have a high school diploma. I'd like to go to college, to go to Linear Tech for a 2-year degree and study physical therapy, be assistant. But unfortunately, that requires a high school diploma, and so right now I just working a little hard, and so.
He's waiting on us.
Yeah.
So what was your GPA at Lambert, Caleb?
I believe I had, I think 3.4.
Yeah, it was over a 3.0.
Yeah.
And I will promise you, if you go to Lambert High School, you get a quality education. So there's no doubt that Caleb has earned.
And you passed all the rest of the tests, right, Caleb?
That's right.
Passed everything else but that.
Yes, sir.
You know, Caleb, Representative Dixon and I were talking yesterday. When I graduated, son, they required you had to pass the spelling test. Thank the Lord, I passed by 1 point. I wouldn't have graduated. So I know, ain't that right, Representative Dixon?
That was before we had cars.
That's right, before we had cars. That's right. We used an abacus and it worked.
Yes. But Chairman Dixon, real quick.
The young lady that you read the letter about, I believe I was superintendent in that system when she failed to graduate. So his story and all these others, when we get this thing finished, I'm going to take that young lady to the Board of Education to help her get that diploma.
Thank you for that. Let me say, Mr. Chairman, do you want to say anything else, son?
Really, all I was only going to say is that I've passed every other graduation test. My favorite subject was history, and I passed that easily. And I passed lit and science, and I had a great science teacher, and I had a really good time at high school. But I even had great math teachers, but I really wish there was some way to pass this test.
We hope, Caleb, that help is on the way, and thank you so much for coming today. Thank you, Caleb.
You know, he's an Eagle Scout also.
Absolutely.
Wow. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I have questions at this point if you'd like to take them from the committee.
I just want to say one thing that came up in the subcommittee. Somebody said, are we not lowering our standards if we do something like that? We have standards. Are we letting people by? Lord, no. Let me tell you, Gary just reminded me that hundreds of these students are losing scholarships because of one little test. Colleges want them. I talked to a young man last year, was one of the finest pitchers that came out of one, and I'm not talking about just sports, but he had a full paid scholarship just to go, and that kept him from possibly a future baseball career or a good career in sports. But it's just the fact the standards are still tough. These students, most of them, Gary reminded me, were 3 and 3.5 point average. Matter of fact, we're talking to the Office of Student Finance, as Tom reminded me yesterday, to see how this would affect Hope. Because I'm going to tell you, a lot of these students will probably be eligible for Hope if we'll just give them hope. That's what it's all about.
Yes.
Are they here? And I'd like to ask, so you may want to ask them a question.
Sure. Well, I've got a blinking nuclear power plant control board here with lots of questions. So I think the committee is inclined favorably if I had to read the tea leaves here. So I would like to recognize people quickly, but let's number 11, you wave, Amy. Number 28 down there, who's that?
That's
Miss Chandler.
I. I just want to thank you for bringing this. And I think all of us would say that. As a school counselor, I've worked with so many kids that would be able to pass everything and do well like this young man, but take one area and take that test over and over, and in many cases do worse because they became so very frustrated. So I'm just so grateful that this is going to give so many young people and adults a chance.
I'm going to go with Representative Glanton because he was the first light blinking over here. Representative Glanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank you on behalf of my niece, Jordan Stewart. Jordan attended Chattooga High School, and she's taken the test 6 times, the science portion, and have come within a few points of passing and haven't done it. And so since that time, like a lot of young people, she has lost her courage to take it again, and she's been embarrassed. And as a result, she lost a basketball scholarship, and she is now working at a fast food restaurant in Somerville, Georgia. And so on behalf of my family and her, thank you.
Amen. I'm going to go in order now. Number 1, Representative Howard.
I concur with everything that I've heard, but I want to thank you as well. I've heard these stories over and over again in my district. My sister was a victim of this as well, and she's 28 now. She was able to go on and pass a test after I think about 12 times, and but she's a certified what do you call it, the folk in the funeral business. She's gone to school and she's mortician. Yeah. So thank you, and I look forward to supporting this bill.
Number 16, is that Representative Stovall?
I too want to thank you, Chairman, and all those who worked on the bill. Even being a parent in the high school, hearing all the horror stories from students and crying and a lot of emotional distress that a lot of them suffered, me hearing a lot of it as well. So I think this is going to be very beneficial. I'm just excited and pray that the school systems jump on board and don't drag their feet, which I've seen it many times. We're going ahead and pushing it through. The only other question I just thought about up here was the certificate of completion. What about those kids that end up being, because they couldn't pass the graduation test, end up settling for the certificate of completion?
They're going to get their diploma.
Okay, good.
They just go apply to the school, go by, we're telling them, go by the school. We're going to advertise this in the paper everywhere. You go by the school, you tell them, and they'll get your diploma.
All right, Representative Beskin sneaking in at the wire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It sounds like one result of this will allow the schools to retroactively amend their graduation rate so that schools that have had a very low graduation rate, it's not good, but this will allow those children to be reflected as having graduated from those schools.
That's the only thing we can't do because we don't want to violate any federal laws or anything. So this will not improve or affect the graduation rate at all. This will be, we're just giving them their diploma. It will not. Okay. That's a good question, though.
You can tell I'm new on the committee, so thank
that's
you.
okay. That's a good question.
Welcome to the federal regulation land.
Yeah, federal regulation, yeah.
Excellent.
Mr. Chairman, do you mind, I mean, before you stop, would you let the officer, let the
I am more than happy to do that. So I've got 3 more and we'll get the finance folks. Number 10 is Representative Tanner.
Chairman Coleman, did you think any more about what we discussed relating to the conversation we had after subcommittee, you know, where if someone's, say, 35 years old, they apply, they get their diploma, and the diploma is going to reflect what date they graduated. They actually earned their diploma, quite frankly, back in '87 or whenever the case might be. But if I'm an employer and I'm looking at that person's diploma and it says 2015 and they're 40 years old, I'm going to question that. And we talked about maybe putting in that the school would set that graduation date as the date they should have graduated. Is that still possible?
Well, let me tell you, I had a conversation with Betsy yesterday. I talked with Gary yesterday. I've talked with a couple of principals about this yesterday. Some of the larger systems where they have hundreds of diplomas anyway and they send them out constantly, this could be a problem. But a couple of the schools I talked to said they'll let whatever the student wants, they'll be glad to work with them. And Gary may want to comment how its work operates now.
Because the local board of education has the authority to issue the diploma, not the state board of education, the waivers that come to the state board of education, we leave it up to the local school system on how they date the diplomas. But We have learned that most school systems do date the diploma on the date that the year that the student was had met the graduation requirements.
Can I follow up? Just
yes,
one?
sir.
My concern, and I'm looking at it from an employer perspective, when someone comes in, and someone who's employed a lot of people in the government sector, when someone comes in and applies for a job with me, they're signing, especially when I was working in local government, we had certain forms they signed swearing that they were telling the truth. They have to put the date they graduated from high school. I just want to make sure there's no issues moving forward. There's no confusion for that person what date they have to put. And that's why, again, it may not be practical, but if we could put in this legislation that if they, whatever date they should have graduated, that's the date of their graduation. Whether they put it on the diploma or not, legally, that's the date of their graduation.
Well, I would say that when talking with a couple of schools, that this gentleman here that walked, he graduated. What was it, last year? Yeah. Graduated last year. He just did not receive his diploma. He could put on his job application, I graduated 2013 or 14, but that he's just gonna get his diploma later. But we're still looking into that. That's a good one.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll let, because the chair has a question about that too. So when we get around to the motion, I want to address that with the representative at that time. Representative Carter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm on page 8, lines 257 through 258. Is it your intention that this advertisement run once a year, or is it okay if it runs 3 days in a row?
No, we want it at least once a year. They're going to run it, in other words, they run it in the local paper 3 times, just one time a year. I see what, but it looks like it could say 3 times in 2016 is what you're saying.
Well, I'm saying that as long as you run it 3 times before January 15th of 2016,
I know what you're saying, Representative Carter.
It may need to say 3 times, comma, at least once per year.
Well, see what it says right now. It says they're running it at least 3 times. One time no later than January 15th. One time, I see what you're no later than 17th. One time later than 18th.
Betsy? All right, the chair's going to take that, and we're going to have a cleanup section on the bill, if that's all right, when we get to the motion. So that's
and lastly,
Representative Carter.
If Roy Rogers were on this committee, how do you think he would vote?
Hey, Roy would have no doubt. He'd be singing Happy Trails right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, the trail's getting shorter. We've got one more blinking light, and then we've got the finance folks. Number 26 over there, is that Representative Clark?
And Mr. Chairman, I waive because my concern was the same as Mr. Tanner's, and it had to do with the date on the diploma. When they go to a job, any interview, that would be a very big concern.
Well, Representative Clark, I'm going to tell you, as much problem that these students have had, I don't think it'd be a problem for the schools to put the date they want. I agree with you. See,
well, Brother Coleman,
that'd be the least they could
much.
do. I agree. I'm behind you on that one.
All righty. So, Mr. Chairman, you wanted the Georgia Student Finance people to talk a little bit.
Just
Are
about
they here today?
How this would affect Hope.
Yes. Do you mind going over to the microphone real quick? This is a pretty important thing we're doing here today. I want to make sure everything is on the record.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Chris Green. I work for the Georgia Student Finance Commission. After meeting with the bill authors and legislative council, we have no concerns about the bill. We stand ready and willing to help these students however we can. Thank Representative Coleman for bringing it to your attention.
Do you have an interpretation about hope and eligibility, like my friend Caleb here? In other words, is anything about backdating the diploma going to cause a problem with hope eligibility?
Yeah, it's 7 years to have.
Yeah, is it 7 years? Yeah.
7 years, if I could check with legislative council, my understanding is that the bill now clarifies that for those few students that would be caught up in that, we can address that in our rules and regulations.
But the intent is that for the people within that 7-year window that they would be hope eligible. Is that correct, Mr. Coleman? Is that the intent?
My intent is any student.
Yeah.
By regulation, the 7-year window be fine, but the others they would address through regulations.
Yes, sir.
Qualify.
Yes, sir.
That's my intent.
All right. Any questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What the chair would like to do at this time is entertain a motion, and I think I have a gentleman who'd like to do that. And then once there's a motion on the table, I think we want to talk about maybe if we need to do any amendments. So at this time, Chairman Dixon, I heard you might want to make a motion.
Yes, I'm pleased to make a motion to do pass for House Bill 91.
I have a motion and a second. All right. First amendment the chair would like to bring up is, council, do we need to change the wording on the lines 256 to 258?
On line 256, I think if we add the word annually after the word shall, so that
Yes.
each local school system shall annually advertise the provisions of the code section at least 3 times, one time no later than, and then continue on. I think that should clarify the intent, that they can't advertise it 3 times before January 15th.
Mr. Chairman, would you like to offer that amendment?
I would.
Would you take the 3 times out, because that, it still is a little confusing if they would do times at once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mean 3 times each year or once each year?
Could they not say each local system shall advertise the provisions of this code section one time no later than, and one time, would that do it?
No.
Mayor McCartney, no, it wouldn't do it, would it?
Annually.
Oh, annually, I like that. Annually.
Yes.
All right, so it would read each local school system shall annually advertise the provisions of this code section one time no later than January 15th,
Yes.
2016.
Yep.
I like that.
You like that amendment, Mr. Chairman? Is there any objection from the committee to adopting that amendment? Hearing no objection, the amendment is adopted. The other thing I wanted to discuss with the committee, Vice Representative Tanner, Mr. Chairman, so with the diploma dating, in other words, is it something that we could do in statute, council, or is it something that because of the other code about the Board of Education, do we need to defer to them on the date on the diploma?
Yes, they have local.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the position has always been that the conferring of diplomas is purely a local board of education jurisdiction. So right now, we already have this situation. If the state board approves a waiver and then sends it back to the locals to issue the diploma, we also have some code sections on World War II veterans, Korean War veterans. So there's already a process in place. And again, it's always been kind of understood to be the purview of the locals. You could put that in there if you're wanting to sort of, give them direction or require them to do that, but it does start getting into their control and management authority, I think.
In talking,
Chairman,
again,
yeah.
Mr. Chairman, in talking with the school boards, the superintendents I talk with, and the School Boards Association, Superintendent Association, I expressed my concern about this, and of course, some of the as I said, some of the superintendents said to me that they're already doing this. When you approve them, they're coming in and they're giving them their diploma, and it's reflecting that. So I personally think I'm like Betsy. I talked about this a long time. I talked about it with legal counsel. We talked about it. I think we'd be stepping on shaky ground because what we're already doing with the waivers we passed, and then we start all of a sudden mandating when we give a diploma. That's the only thing that bothers me. I agree with it. I think if I were a student get mine, I would say, could I have it dated my date? Yes, go.
We have, well, I was going to say, any further discussion or amendments? So number 12, Representative Teasley.
Is it possible to, without trying to step on their toes, make it permissive so that it suggests the idea so that they don't say, well, we can't do it on that day? What if we were to say the local school board may?
Is encouraged or?
I mean, we could add a sentence that says, really restate what is already there, but that the local school system shall have the discretion to determine the date that the diploma, has on it or something like that.
I like the whole intent of the legislature session in there, at least the chair does at that point. So let's discuss a little bit further. This is, and I know we're taking a long time on this bill, Mr. Chairman, but this is a big deal, and I'm more confident that our House members will review this thoroughly than those other people somewhere else. Representative Carter, number 11.
I just sent a text to my school where I teach, the high school, and I wonder if someone in the audience is in a high school and knows the answer to this. I've seen our diplomas before our kids get them, and they're printed. The question is, does my school system get the certificate with the seal on it and literally print it in-house or print it somewhere locally? Or do we order those out, like the whole state of Georgia orders those out? And if so, would we have to keep diplomas?
I understand.
Keep them there with the year on it in order to take care of this issue. They're all purchased locally. Okay.
All right, Representative Tanner.
Just kind of addressing legislative council's concerns with my personal thoughts on this, that from what we've heard and from what you've heard, the local schools would have already given this young man his diploma if they had the ability to do that.
Right.
We as a state have prevented that from occurring because we as a state put in this graduation test. So it's our fault that these individuals have not graduated, not the local school. So I think that we need, this is just my opinion, that we need to make it very clear that when they graduated was when they should have graduated, because again, I don't think we're stepping on the locals' toes because they would have already given them the diploma.
And I have no problem with that.
I don't know how to word the amendment, Mr.
That's
Chairman.
my problem. I don't know about the word.
But I would ask that this committee consider amending this legislation to make it very clear that these individuals, because there's a lot of them, there's what, 4,000 received a year?
About 8,000 or 9, yeah.
That these individuals, because they've been held up by the state, not the local school, that it reflect the date they should have graduated.
Mr. Chairman, could Betsy maybe work us up something?
Chairman Dixon has good comments. Chairman Dixon, if I can push the button right. Go ahead.
I think we need to be just a little bit careful. If you look at the language as it relates to the Hope Scholarship, I don't think that it gives the student finance the authority to eliminate that 7-year window. So if you've got a child from 2003, the Gordon girl that we've read about, and they put the 2003 date in there, you have excluded that child from any possibility of.
And she has a 3.5 average.
Right. So, you know, in that girl's case, she would say to you, I want 2015 on my diploma. Now, the next kid or child or student may have or adult, senior citizen, might especially want the original date. So I think we need to be very careful about anything that comes close to mandating what date you're going to use.
All righty, number 26, is that Representative Clark?
Chairman Dixon, you are correct, and I stand corrected. I wonder if perhaps we could put some language in the bill that stated that the school system needs to make very certain that that student knows that they can put on any job application that their graduation date was the date that, you know, so there wouldn't be a job situation, that they can put on any job application the date that they should have graduated. That they just need to let the student know they can do that. Okay.
All right.
That's a good point.
I will defer. I'm simply worried about those students. I will.
Mr. Chairman, if that's a good point, I'd like to make, if I could, that when we pass this legislation, it's going to be up to this gentleman here in the Department of Education to communicate all the rules and regulations and how this would operate. Is that not correct? And so they could communicate that now.
All right. Chair's got an idea, but and I've talked to council, let's go ahead and get the other comments quickly. Representative Stovall.
Yes, I just thought about kind of going back with Representative Tanner, is maybe the state can offer, or the State Department of Education can offer a letter for those individuals who might have an issue with their employer, certifying or saying that, you know, this is an official document, so it won't look like it's fraud. Because like you said earlier, if the person has supposedly graduated but was actually working somewhere and then came back and said, oh, now I have my diploma, you know, who's to say which is right, and especially with so much fraud that's going on.
Is that Representative Glanton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm kind of torn with Representative Dixon and also Representative Tanner, because I see both sides. With Representative Dixon, I understand we don't want to mandate anything to anyone, but at the same time, Representative Tanner, we have to be clear, because if we leave things up for interpretation, then depending on that student's parents or that student's reputation, and all these things could be factors in whether or not that school system would choose to give that particular child an option. So that's my concern, and so I'm kind of the baby split.
King Solomon has spoken. Representative Teasley, do you have another question, or are you just blanking over there?
Got pushed down funny.
All right.
I'm just glad we're doing this in the House before it
Dixon, do you
gets
have
on the
another
Senate.
question, or are you just blinking? Okay. I do. I'm sorry, Representative Howard.
I think one thing, we are privy to some information that those 8,000 adults now, students, may not be privy to, and that's that 7-year window. We're hearing that because we're here, and we have the student finance here to tell us this. They won't know that, and if they go back and get that diploma dated back before the 2003, then go out to get want to go back to college and get the Hope Scholarship. That will eliminate them. So, yeah, it's a catch-20. Either way you go here, I'm not sure how you deal with that. But
the chair is going to try to rocket in here with an answer because Legislative Council is smarter than all of us, has come swooping in with an idea. So council just came and informed me it'd be actually a pretty straightforward amendment to the Hope Scholarship eligibility to change the 7-year window to allow a when awarded a window, which would take care of the Hope issue. However, it's going to be a little bit difficult to legislate on language that's not even in the code in front of us. So the chair would entertain whether the disposition of the committee would be that, Mr. Chairman, we can talk about this. I think this bill needs to move now because of the timeliness of it. I think if the committee gave an endorsement that we said that we would like the chair to bring an amendment perhaps to our rules committee friends, which did the Hope Scholarship thing, and that would the education committee endorse that, and then you would be able to change it at that time, and that way we don't lose a week in our process.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, Council, will that need to be a second bill, or it could be on this bill?
Yeah, it is a different code section, but I think it could be in this bill because I think we would need to reference this bill. So it would say something. Right now, the Hope Scholarship says, beginning with those students receiving a Hope Scholarship for the first time on or after July 1, 2011, 7 years from a student's graduation from high school. And then I think if we add language that says, or 7 years from the date a diploma was awarded pursuant to the new code section that you're looking at now, then that's when the 7 years would tick for that.
So you believe we could add that into this bill because of reference code section? All right. So, Mr. Well, I'm hesitant to try to architect the language that passes this committee without even seeing the language in front of us, and it's a different code section, not even printed. However, we amend bills and rules a decent amount of times.
Yeah. Here's
so,
my big,
Mr. Chairman, what do you think?
Here's my biggest concern. The state board has probably granted 2,000 or 3,000 waivers, and the state school systems have been doing it for already 10, 12 years. They're familiar with this. They're already doing it. And what we're doing, they're going to do the same thing they've been doing. Some have put, the date they want, and do it how they are. And I think it's been happening, and they've been doing it for how long? 10 years? Probably what, 2,000, 3,000 diplomas.
That goes to the dating issue of the diploma, but as far as the Hope eligibility, that wouldn't cover that.
No, I'm not. I mean, the Hope I'm fine with. I'm doing the dating. Yeah.
All right. We need to kind of hopefully wrap this up. That Representative Maxwell.
I was going to question David about getting that language in this bill.
Yeah.
I'd almost like to do that on the Senate side, but that's okay because rules are so hard. But we can amend it in rules. That'd be fine.
It's up to you.
We've got a lot of support there.
Was that Representative Chandler? 28.
I am almost sure that Representative Evans has a bill that she has already, I don't think she's dropped it yet, but she's proposing it, that would extend that 7 years. I want to say, I don't remember how long, or maybe it was indefinite, but you might want to check with Representative Evans about that.
All right. Representative Teasley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One more thing is you could say, if we're trying to work on the date here, to say we're going to leave that up to the discretion of the local school board, but it may include the date that they would have graduated. So we're still leaving it up to the local school board to decide that, but we are also suggesting that or making it permissive. It could include the day that the year they graduated, that they walked.
You okay with that, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Because I'm permissive. Yeah. Betsy, could you phrase us up something about that?
That is the minor. To me, those are minor things. I just want to get them worked out.
It's a minor thing, but
no,
it's
no. Wait a
minute.
minute. I mean, that I'm not going to object to.
I understand.
I'm saying, yeah, no.
Betsy, you have any language that would be permissive, like Representative Teasley talked about? Working. While she's doing that, let me just take the sense of the committee. As we move this bill forward in the process, we're not going to formally vote on this right now, but I just want to get a sense so you can say that your committee's behind you. Would the committee be amenable to changing the 7-year HOPE eligibility to reflect the date of the diploma at some point in the process, or if Representative Evans' bill does it, but if it doesn't, what's the committee's sense of it? I see nodding heads. Do I see any strong objections to that? Any objections? All right. So I think, Mr. Chairman, you know the process as well as anybody, so I think the committee would like to see that as the bill move forward if in some way, either, as you move,
Hope, yeah.
Yeah, either with rules or with Senate or however.
We can just have Betsy draw it up and we can just move it.
Betsy? All right. Does that satisfy you, Representative Teasley? Representative Tanner? Representative Coleman, are you friendly to that amendment?
Say that again. Where is it, Betsy?
It would go on line 249, I think, after the word awarded, and be a new sentence after the end of that sentence.
Yeah, I'm fine with that, yeah.
All right, so Chairman's amenable.
And then you're saying the HOPE component will not be in here, but a separate piece of legislation that we'll move on.
Or you can work on in the Senate or whatever. So, any objection from the committee from the amendment that Betsy just read?
I don't have an objection, Chair, but
Do you have an objection?
I don't have an objection, but I still have a concern about may, because I think that conjures up opportunities for people to mistreat people, and I think we're either going to do it or we shouldn't do it. Okay, but I don't think may.
Okay.
It
sounds like you're objecting to the amendment.
I'm not objecting. I don't choose to object to the amendment, Mr. Chair, and asking you to be patient with me. What I'm saying is that we need to reconsider what we're saying and what we're allowing. Without mandating it to anyone, we need to be conscious of the fact that when it's left to interpretation, and we know what that does, then there are going to be some folks that are going to be not treated well depending on the districts that they live and the socioeconomics of their environment. That's what I'm saying.
I understand. The chair's opinion was that the author of the bill was comfortable with a permissive language, but not more than that, based on the things that he said. And if we want another amendment which is stronger, then we can talk about that as a committee.
Based on the fact, and I have talked with schools, I've talked with superintendents, I've talked with that we've been doing it for 10 years. Everybody that gets it, they are tickled to death. Matter of fact, I have one that just finished it. They approved last month. She is tickled to death. I'm going to call her so we get through. She's going to be here when we do it on the floor, not speak, but they're happy with this being the way it's happening now. All of them have been happy with it, but this does not bother me. I think it'll be fine. But that one does not bother me.
That one doesn't bother. All right. I'll give them a second to have a conversation. So, there is an amendment on the table, and I've got to dispose of this amendment, and then if we have other amendments, do that. But so the amendment from Betsy, the permissive language, is there objection to that amendment? I have objection. No, Representative Dixon.
I just wanted to hear it again. That's all. I mean, because there's been so much chatter.
Well, she's read it twice, but we'll read it one more time.
Well, I'd like
Go ahead,
to hear it again,
Betsy.
if you don't mind, sir.
Sure,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
The local board of education may date the high school diploma on the date the student graduated or the date the diploma was conferred.
I guess any questions on the amendment? All right, 26.
I believe that opens up a concern again. And if Chairman Dixon's concern was addressed with the 7 years, perhaps we could go back and think about this in rules before we put that into the bill right now, and perhaps consider stating that it should be conferred when the student graduated.
So you're looking for a stronger language is what I'm hearing.
I am, as long as
All right.
Chairman Dixon's
All right.
concern is addressed.
The chair is interpreting all this chatter as objection to the amendment. Is there any further discussion on the amendment, which is the permissive language from Representative Howerton? We have Robert's rule. We have an amendment on the table. The chairman has agreed to it. We have to dispose of this amendment. So any further discussion on the amendment? All in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. No. The amendment passes. All right. So at this point, is there any further questions, amendments, or business on LC 335873S? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second as do pass, and now it is amended twice that we've discussed in here. So with the annual language and then with the language on the permissive on the diploma date. So, being no further questions, all in favor please say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Mr. Chairman, the bill passes and goes to rules.
We'll get with Legislative Council. I will look and consider where, if y'all give me the right, where I think it'd be the best to do all this, and we'll go to it. And I'll get with the other groups. Thank y'all. All right.
Just, the meeting is still going on. We have two more bills, but just so you know.
Thank you so much for
Thank y'all for coming. We'll keep you on the loop on how it's going. Absolutely. You're a great spokesman for this. I really appreciate it. Hopefully we're riding to the rescue. We'll see.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Glad to have you.
Let's go. All right, come back to order. Let's go ahead. What's the next piece of legislation? Whose committee was that? Valerie was in. All right, is that one we bring in full committee? That's yours. Go ahead. That was from your committee originally last year, wasn't it? Kevin Tanner's bill. Is that the one we're bringing that came from Valerie's or that?
No, it came from came from Representative Clark's committee.
All right, Representative Clark, we have your committee had a piece of legislation you wanted to recommend. So I want to thank y'all for that great discussion, and I think we're going to just have me get it through the House. All right, Representative Clark, what's your mic number? All right.
Representative Tanner's bill number 62, he recommended do pass. This pertains to the special needs scholarship.
All right. That's all right, you can use it. It's okay, do it. I don't care. I just want to see that bill. Okay, Representative Tanner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm on LC 335687, should be in your packet. This relates to the Georgia Special Needs Scholarship. The only thing we're doing is, in order to receive the Georgia Special Needs Scholarship in Georgia, you have to have been in a Georgia school for 1 year in public school. The problem, though, is for our military families who are stationed here in Georgia and move into the state, all this bill does is waive the 1 year public school requirement just for those individuals who are stationed here in Georgia as a military family. All the other requirements still remain. They have to still apply for the scholarship like any other student. They don't automatically receive the scholarship. They just don't have to have the year requirement, Mr. Chairman. I will say I also have Dr. David Miller here, not to speak, but he's from Burnell University. They have a program at Burnell where their students identify things in legislation where it's affecting their occupation that they're going into and concern, and they listen to constituents and present legislation. And myself and Senator Gooch go every year and sit on a panel. This idea actually originated at Burnell from some problems that they saw with some students not receiving this scholarship because of the year requirement, the military families. So I want to just recognize that he's here, and I appreciate those students' hard work on this effort also.
Okay. Do I have any questions? I see none. Oh, yes, number 9. All right, Representative Mayo.
Yes, bringing the bill. My question is, would we be disrupting the process of uniformity here if we're allowing certain families and certain students to be exempt from the 1-year requirement?
I do not think so, because the issue with military families is everyone else, they may have different circumstances that lead them here to Georgia, but they have a choice where they live. These military individuals are stationed here. These are only active duty military personnel stationed here by order of the president and commanders of the military to be here in Georgia. So I think because of that, it's a good exception. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Representative Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for bringing this. And just to share with my colleague down the road, is my daughter went to 4 high schools before she graduated, and through no fault of her own, just traveling with me from station to station. And so I appreciate you bringing this bill, and hopefully those who haven't had to experience those sacrifices made by military families every day would support this bill.
Thank you for your service.
All right. Representative Dixon.
First of all, in further response to his question, we made an exception already last year on the length of time a student had to be when there were medical issues. So we've already made that exception. I just want to make sure that the student, even though we're waiving the year's length, the student still needs to enroll in a school simply because we got to get them onto the FTE count in order for the funding mechanisms to work, I think, and to evaluate the IEP. So I don't see that the language says that they don't have to enroll. So maybe that we won't have a problem with that, but I just something that
Representative, let me ask, is Gary still here? Would that be true? Would they have, Gary, do you see a problem with that?
Mm-hmm. Really? Okay.
They do, Mr. Chairman, have to have the IEP, but it doesn't. I don't know that it specifies they have to be enrolled in school. And I do appreciate you being my #1 co-sponsor on the legislation.
Yeah, but I'm withdrawing my signature.
Oh,
yeah.
Bingo, bingo, bingo.
I try to lend credibility to you. It's,
is there anyone else who would like to speak? I see no one else on the board, so do I have a motion? I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a second. Any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. Unanimous. Okay, it's yours. Go to rules and get them.
Thank you.
Yeah, Reverend Caldwell, we're going to get him up here. This bill we're about to take up now, House Bill 62, did not go to a subcommittee this time because it passed the House last year, I understand, got to the Senate and got bogged down. So we just felt like we just bring it on to the full committee. We will not have any discussion with the audience, but we will ask you to answer some questions. So Representative Caldwell, if you come to the desk and please present. That's House Bill 62, LC 65.
65.
Yeah, LC 335725.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, sir.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to present House Bill 65 today. Members of the committee, y'all having fun yet? This was House Bill 886 last year. You may or may not remember it. If you don't, I'll remind you it passed unanimously through this committee last year. House Bill 65 is very simple. Believe it or not, under current code in Georgia, we require every local government to hold public hearings before they pass a budget. That is, every local government unless it has anything to do with education. So we have no requirements when it comes to public hearings for any of our LEAs. This would fix that. It does 3 very simple things. It would require that they hold 2 public hearings before they pass their budget. They provide their summary budget online, and they provide their line item detailed budget upon request digitally for free, so there's no cost to the district or the charter. We can walk through the lines for you if you'd like. I will make one mention, only because I promised stakeholders that I would. We've had absolutely no opposition to the bill that I'm aware of. In fact, I joked in Rules Committee last year that even Cherokee County School District supports this bill. So it's a relatively non-controversial bill. There was a concern last year. The Education Full Committee introduced language during the committee hearing that would provide for statewide charters, that they would hold a public hearing in the area that their charter was headquartered, as well as the metropolitan Atlanta area. There was a concern about statewide charters who don't touch the metropolitan Atlanta area. Maybe they serve 8 counties in southeast Georgia. I'll leave that up to the discretion of the committee. I just promised that I would bring it up to you. But outside of that, I know of absolutely no concerns on the bill. And I look forward to, I certainly hope for the members' favorable consideration.
All right. Anyone have a question? All right. Representative Mayo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, thank you for bringing the bill once again. My concern and my question is related to lines 18 and 19. I see there's an exemption. Looks like we're giving conversion charter schools and career academies a special exception to this bill, and we're eliminating them from being included here. Why are we treating them in a unique, special way? Are they not public, traditional, or?
They absolutely are, and it's a great question. The reason behind that, that provision came out of the Senate last year, and originally I fought it, and then they helped me understand why. Their budgets actually fall under other LEA's budgets, and so through their public hearing process, you're going to get all of that information as it is. So rather than use taxpayer money to go duplicate the process again, we maintain the requirement on state and locally approved charters because they have separate budgeting processes. These guys don't. So we're just going to make sure that they fall under the LEA that they're already under the umbrella of. Thank you. Great question.
All right. Any other questions? Any other questions? I have a motion we do pass. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor? Any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. All right. It's up to you and rules.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
All right. At this time, we're going to move quickly. We're going to sign bills. We have about 35, but we're only going to sign about 10. So please listen at this time. All right, Representative Dudgeon.
And we will email these out, so don't worry about taking notes at home. But I just want to get clarification. So House Bill 100 about kindergarten age eligibility, you may have heard a little bit about that by Representative Dixon, going to academic achievement. We're going to try to hear that Monday early afternoon. That bill has a lot of interest. We want to get that hearing probably scheduled soon. House Bill 100, academic achievement. House Bill 111 about school bus advertising, academic support. House Bill 7, Child Emergency Protection Act, academic support. House Bill 131 by Representative Dickerson, cyberbullying, academic support. House Bill 132, comprehensive civics education with Representative Buckner, academic achievement. 135, Representative Howard, too young to suspend, academic support. Dropout Deterrent Act, House Bill 139, Representative Stevens, academic innovations. House Bill 142, Anti-Discrimination Act, Representative Bell, academic innovations. House Bill 144, Student Online Personal Information Act, Representative Gordon, academic support. House Bill 164, Professional Standards Commission requirements for Representative Chuck Martin, academic achievement. House Bill 198 by Representative Dempsey, suicide prevention training, academic support. House Bill 30 by Representative Mitchell relating to records for sanctioning for inspection, academic support. House Bill 209, Georgian Specialty Scholarship requirement, Representative Beskin, academic support. And there's a bill that was dropped today that we anticipate being in the Education Committee, and if so, we will deal with it accordingly, and that is House Bill 243 by Representative Hamilton related to education scholarships, and that is tentatively to academic innovations, though I do believe that we may have some more information on that.
Okay. All right, any questions? I have a question from Representative Clark.
Mr. Chairman, if you would permit, this was assigned to 243, House Bill 243 by Representative Hamilton, was assigned to academic innovations. I would propose, with your permission, that this be heard by the entire committee. It is a very important bill, and it is very large. It has a great impact on our state, so I would propose that the entire committee hear this.
You know, I have assigned all the legislation to 3 subcommittees, and I'm finding with all this going on, ladies and gentlemen, we're having 1 or 2 people to come to these subcommittees, 3 or 4. And I agree with you. That's going to be probably one of the most debated pieces of legislation we have. And I understand it has lots of signatures, and we're going to probably have a big attendance. So if it's, I'm going to ask the committee, if you don't mind, this is the discretion of the chair. If you, under your recommendation, I will have you chair. We'll move it to the full committee and have it heard in the full committee. I think that would be good.
Thank you, sir.
Do you want to describe what it is, Mr. Chairman? He's going to describe what it is.
And just to be clear, that bill was introduced today. It has not been assigned by the Speaker. It may not go into education, but because of the magnitude of the bill, we'll talk to the chairman about wanting to not have to wait a week to get it in the process, because it probably will take multiple hearings on this bill. And that's why we didn't want to wait a week. So that's why we've tentatively done this. So going to full committee. It's a bill around establishing a education savings account where state funds money would go to an account which the parent could use for different educational needs, private school, homeschool, tuition, special needs, things of that nature. So we're not going to debate the bill today, but that's what that is.
All right, any questions on that one? Any objection to me doing that? Any objection?
Full committee. Yeah.
All right. Let me say, once again, now listen very carefully. Next 2 weeks are going to be very critical. We're going to probably have this bill heard if it comes. We're going to have the kindergarten bill. Where's Representative Dixon? That one's going to be very important and probably has generated as many emails as the graduation. Also, now listen very carefully. The governor's constitutional amendment. Now, listen very carefully. The governor's constitutional amendment, that discussion is going to take place next week now. Really encourage you to come and listen to the debate. The debate. We're going to have people from Tennessee. We're going to have people from New Orleans here to talk about that one. We also remember APUSH. APUSH is critical. Yes. Let me turn you on. What?
Turn me on.
Oh, y'all, good Lord. It's too late in the day, people. Representative Kaiser, you're out of order. Would you like to say something?
Still waiting on you to turn me
Please
on.
delete that from Representative Carter, go ahead.
Okay, so the APUSH meeting is at 1 o'clock on Tuesday, and the second, I forgot what it is. I must have gotten turned on. The second, what was the second topic?
APUSH is the
Constitutional
18th.
Amendment
It's
is
the 18th.
on Wednesday. No, the next week.
The
Okay.
next week.
All right,
APUSH is the following week. And that's not going to be the real, that's going to be just that discussion. We're going to have debate between the two sides. Any other questions about that? Also remember, your dues, 2-year dues, $25. Representative Benton, raise your hand right there. He said, before you pass out today, it's $25. Tom owes him $1 and I owe him $1. Well, we'll get it right. So be sure you pay your dues. That takes care of all the dues you'll have for 2 years. Any other questions? Remember our dinner. Sheena, when's the dinner? Sheena, when's the dinner? Remember the dinner the 17th. Please let Sheena know if you're coming because we've got to have the reservations. Any other questions? You are adjourned. Thank you. Boy, what a day. What a day.